Hello, I'm John Liu, and I'm really happy to have this opportunity to speak with you today remotely. I'm also very grateful to the Common Land Foundation and the Mustard Seed Trust that make it possible for me to do this work. I have been a professional witness and a student of transformational change in politics, economics, culture, and ecology over my entire adult life. In the early 1990s, the World Bank asked me to film a baseline study for a very large development program called the Loess Plateau Watershed Rehabilitation Project. Now, when I first arrived in the Loess Plateau in the early 1990s, I found a fully degraded landscape, virtually no vegetation, extremely low relative humidity. There was no way for moisture to infiltrate and be retained in the subsoils. The living soils had eroded away. It was known as the most eroded place on Earth. The people who lived there were in extreme poverty, and all of their behaviors actually were analyzed and found to be completely unsustainable. So when the researchers analyzed what it was like to deforest these mountains, or what was the result of planting on the sides of hillsides like this, or what was the effect of free ranging of goats and sheep, they found that all of them were unsustainable. And so they decided to ban them all. Now, making them illegal meant that the people couldn't do them anymore. And it also meant that they needed to transition the entire population to another way of life. So they began to pay them to learn ecosystem restoration and to do ecosystem restoration. So they learned by doing. And there were experts who understood it, and everyone basically was employed and trained to do this. And this is terracing, and this is a fairly primitive part of this because they're using just hand tools. Later on, they got some bulldozers and went at a larger scale. But this basically meant that the people were transitioned over a decade to a new way of life, and their old behaviors were lost and their new behaviors became habitual. And they found several very interesting things. For instance, once they did this terracing, they made small dams and check dams and different sorts of methods to infiltrate and retain moisture. They had more water. Then when they planted forests on the ecological land, which turned out to be much more than the economic land, then they found that they could actually increase productivity by reducing the area in cultivation. This is exactly what needs to be understood in order to feed 8 to 10 billion people on the planet. When I first filmed Mr. Ta Fu-Yuan and his colleagues back in 1995, I had no idea this initiative could achieve such dramatic results. The effort that people put into converting their slopes into terraces has resulted in a marked increase in agricultural productivity. The higher yields are directly related to the return of natural vegetation in the surrounding ecological land. Well, this was a revelation to me that it was possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. And I've spent every moment since this time trying to understand all the various aspects of these systems that are interconnected. And I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to study this, and I've been to more than 90 countries now looking at these situations. And I found that there are really only two states. There's functional, which I would equate to evolutionary succession, or there is massive dysfunction. And this dysfunction looks like it's totally connected to human history. So human impact on ecological systems without consciousness leads to degradation, but it's not an inevitability. And what I saw were the principles, and the principles of evolutionary succession are always more biodiversity, always more biomass, always more accumulated organic material. And this is what creates, naturally filters, and continuously renews the oxygenated atmosphere, the fresh water system, the soil fertility, and the amazing biodiversity that evolves on the earth. And so learning this, following this, has made me realize that this is what we need to do. We need to restore all degraded lands on the earth. This is my friend Willem Farida, who is the CEO of the Common Land Foundation, which now has over 2 million hectares in restoration around the world and is advising many organizations and individuals on restoration.
Yeah.
How are we going to deal with climate change? The talk just goes on and on and on, but yet here is something that can be done.
Yeah. These especially these man-made deserts, we can turn them into green areas again. It's lots of effort, it's lots of labor, but we have the financial means to do it, and it will sequester, it will be carbon sinks. But we just have to shift our attention to the natural systems. So what I propose is that we go to a system where we have 4 returns per hectare, and that a financial return or an investment return is a logical thing. But there are other 3 returns. The return of natural capital, or the return of nature, you could say, here. The return of jobs, very important, because we are talking about people who want to work or need work and want to live well. But maybe the most important is return of inspirational capital, or return of inspiration. If you bring the return of inspiration back in the landscape, it will also bring back a return of meaningfulness in people themselves.
Simultaneously with the development of common land, I've been working on another project, which is the creation of the ecosystem restoration camps movement. Over the last 5 years, it's gone from no camps to 50 camps in 6 continents. So there's a lot of evidence that local people and many institutions and many locations are ready to do restoration on a planetary scale. And what we're finding is that actually the value created by restoration is vastly higher than the productivity. So we've made an error in our calculation about value. We need to change the economy.
The movement that we're building here together is about bringing back hope. It's about bringing back purpose in life.
The biggest problem that exists on our planet Earth now is climate change.
So as a result, we're facing so many problems, but the solution to them is the same. We start restoring the ecology, the ecosystems.
If we apply regenerative techniques to bring it back to life, this is enough to reverse climate change.
Well, thank you for listening, and here's my information. Feel free to contact me if you would like to. Thanks very much, and welcome to the EcoRestoration Alliance.